Nope.
Hello, dear listener. Thank you for joining me in this week's video. It wasn't too long ago when I heard about the notorious dancing plague of 1518. I looked into it and was intrigued by how the human mind can convince us of so much. This inspired me to look into similar events in history, and let me tell you, there are some weird ones. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about 7 insane plagues in history. Let's begin. Number 1. The Dancing Plague of 1518. In July 1518, residents of the city of Strasbourg, which was then a part of the Holy Roman Empire, were struck by a sudden and seemingly uncontrollable urge to dance. This hysteria kicked off when a woman known as Frau Trophia stepped into the street and began to silently twist, twirl, and shake. She kept up her solo dancing for nearly a week, and it wasn't long until 36 or so other residents had joined in. Within the short span of a month, this dancing epidemic had claimed approximately 400 victims. With no explanation for their behavior, local physicians blamed it on hot blood and suggested the people were simply trying to dance their fevers away. A stage was constructed and professional dancers were brought in. The town even hired a band to provide background music, but it wasn't long until the marathon started to take its toll. Many of the dancers began to collapse from sheer exhaustion. Many even died from strokes and heart attacks. This strange episode didn't end until September, when the dancers were whisked away to mountaintop shrines and prayed for absolution. Number 2. The Laughing Epidemic of 1962. At a small girls' boarding school in Tanzania, 3 students started a giggle fit that would go on to last anywhere from a minute or 2 to several hours. This laughter proved to be contagious. It wasn't long until the other girls in their class were doing the same thing. No one else could concentrate on their work, and attempting to restrain the laughing students proved useless. 6 weeks later, more than half of the school's middle and high schoolers had caught the laughing bug. School officials shut the place down, but when they reopened it 2 months later, the laughing plague immediately restarted, and the school was once again affected. The laughing epidemic spread to other schools and was said to last between 6 and 18 months. A linguist by the name of Christian F. Hempelman, who researched the incident, noted that the students also had fits of pain, fainting, crying, and even were breaking into rashes. Quote, "The bad news is, it had nothing to do with humor. There was no merriment. Laughter was only one of the many symptoms," says Hempelman. As for a theory behind the laughter, he blamed excessive stress. The school was a very strict one. On top of that, the country had just recently gained its independence, and the citizens were anxious and unsure about their future. Number 3. Dromomania. We all know of at least one person who fills our Facebook or Instagram timelines up with photos of their travel adventures. Along with wondering how these seemingly financially unstable individuals go about funding their expeditions, we also might wonder, aren't they tired of this yet? Turns out, that person you're thinking of just may be suffering from an addiction. according to studies. Psychiatrists have termed this abnormal impulse to travel as dromomania. The case study that spurred the diagnosis was an 1886 event when a French gas fitter, Jean-Albert Dadas, wandered Europe on foot for 5 years before succumbing to exhaustion. By the time he reached the hospital, he retained no memory of his travels. Dromomania was officially added as a psychiatric problem to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder in the year 2000. The definition of the term reads as, quote, "Sufferers have an abnormal impulse to travel. They are prepared to spend beyond their means, sacrifice jobs, lovers, and security in their lust for new experiences." In the recent years, dromomania has widened its horizons to include extremely competitive travelers, those who tend to dedicate their entire life to exploring places, a desire fueled by time, money, and if you ask me, social media fame. And by the way, if I've been pronouncing dromomania wrong this whole time, please let me know in the comments below. Number 4. The Convent Hysteria of 1941. In 1491, several nuns dwelling in a convent in the Spanish Netherlands were possessed by something which compelled them to race around like dogs, jump out of trees in imitation of birds, or meow and claw their way up the trees like cats. Such possession epidemics were by no means confined to nunneries, but nuns were affected more than others. Over the next 2 centuries, nunneries ranging from Rome to Paris were plunged into states of delirium, causing residents to foam, scream, convulse, sexually harass exorcists and priests, and make confessions to having carnal relations with demons. A possible explanation for such epidemic episodes is the ingestion of a mold called ergot, which contains a psychotropic chemical. However, the current consensus of psychology, history, and anthropology explains these outbreaks as mere mass hysteria. Number 5. The Sleepy Sickness Epidemic of 1915. Just after World War I, an odd condition known as sleepy sickness or lethargic encephalitis affected millions of people across the world and left doctors puzzled for decades afterward. It is thought that up to 1 million of those affected by this disturbing illness actually ended up passing away, while many others were transformed into living statues, spending the rest of their lives trapped inside their bodies. Those who entered this zombified state were often locked in institutions, losing their ability to speak and move about. To date, nothing has been definitively proven as to why this plague began, and the sleepy virus remains one of the biggest medical mysteries in history. Although most cases were reported months after World War I ended, it is believed that the epidemic began in 1915, when soldiers who displayed incredible lethargy and confusion were examined by doctors in Paris. At first, they assumed that the main cause of these rather unusual symptoms was mustard gas, which was used during the war, but their assumptions were proved wrong. Are you feeling sleepy yet? Number 6. The June Bug Epidemic of 1962. The June Bug Epidemic was a case of mass hysteria that occurred in a North Carolina textile mill in 1962. Several workers came down with an illness that made them dizzy and nauseous. Because there were some June bugs in the mill, they began to believe the bugs had bitten them and in turn infected them. Though some of the workers really may have been bitten, there is no illness connected with the bite of a June bug. By the time the event had reached its peak, 62 of the mill workers had come down with this mysterious illness. The CDC investigated the case and reached the conclusion that it was mass hysteria. While mass hysteria is more a diagnosis of elimination more than anything else, it is nearly certain in some cases. In the case of the June Bug Epidemic, the victims all worked closely together. No physical reason for the symptoms, such as a virus, was detected. All of the victims had the same or similar symptoms. This, on top of the fact that the symptoms matched some of those associated with mass hysteria, led to the diagnosis of it. Number 7. The Laroy Twitching Epidemic of 2011. Students in Laroy, New York, gained the attention of the US public in 2011 when they began to develop acute motor and vocal tics. Dramatic images of the girls' involuntary movements were briefly seen on national news and social media before clinical neurologists diagnosed the girls with mass psychogenic illness and required their retreat from the media as part of the cure. Many experts looked into this case of sudden Tourette syndrome and blamed everything from autoimmune disorder, problems with vaccines, drugs, and environmental causes. Many of the students began to even hurt themselves by accidentally striking their face and even passing out, causing their heads and other body parts to strike the floor and walls. It was determined that the reason behind the random twitching was conversion disorder, which is a physical manifestation of a psychological symptom where there is traditionally some kind of stress or multiple stressors that provoke a physical reaction within the body. These actions are unconscious and are not done purposefully, says Dr. Jennifer McVeigh, a pediatric neurologist at the Dent Neurological Institute, who was in charge of studying this case. Eventually, the epidemic took care of itself, and I'm glad to say all the students are doing fine. Hello, dear listener. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. I have one last one for you. If you thought the 2011 Twitching Epidemic was the latest one on this list, you'd be wrong. You're forgetting all about the 2018 liking this video epidemic that's striking you right now. Like that video, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and be sure to hit that little bell icon if you want to be notified every time I upload. Until next time, everybody, stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next video.